Hello and welcome back to the Field Coach Experts podcast, where we share the secrets that are unlocking franchisee engagement and performance in progressive brands across North America. I'm your host, Angela Coté, and today we're going to do something a little different. My team and I were recently talking about how crazy it is that I have had the opportunity to facilitate weekly virtual roundtables over the past 6.5 years, and spending time every week with franchisor teams from different roles in the company. So whether that's the field support to the C-suite, and hearing their challenges, working together to problem solve, and hearing what they're working on in terms of innovation, and really just taking it all in. And if you've been to our roundtables, if you're a franchisor or a team member of a franchisor, you know we're all about key takeaways. And so all of this has led to me being able to learn a lot and pick up key takeaways myself. And so we thought, why don't we share those out to our network? So that's what we're here to do today. And maybe, just maybe, if this works out well, we'll do this again. Now, if you know me, you know I'm all about action equals growth. It's a core value. I was going to say a core value, a key core value at AC Inc. And it means that we will find out if this is a good idea just by doing it. So here we go. Today's topic is communication that builds trust. So in franchising, we talk a lot about the importance of communication. And I remember when I was first going to these franchise conferences across North America, where you'd have a bunch of different franchise brands, panels, and people are learning from each other and roundtables. And I remember continuously hearing this thing about how important it is that you have good communication. In fact, I remember my dad saying this as a franchisor. You know, if you know me, you know I grew up in a franchise company that grew to almost 500 locations. And so that was one of the things he always said was one of the secrets to success was good communication with franchisees. And I know that for me, that sounds really vague. And I want to know more. Let's get deeper into what this means. We don't want to keep it high level. We want to get a little bit more into the action steps. And we know that this communication and not good communication is at the heart often of why franchisees disengage. One thing I've noticed over the years is that franchisors often assume that once a franchisee becomes disengaged or overconfident or maybe convinced that they don't need support anymore, that there's really not much you can do. But I don't believe that's true. After the 6 years of facilitating the roundtables and with franchisors and their field teams and working with hundreds of brands over the years and conversations with franchise executives and adding in my background growing up in a franchise, I've learned something different. Trust isn't something that franchisees either have or don't have. It's something that field coaches or FBCs can intentionally build. And today I'm going to share 3 lessons that I've learned about earning the right to influence. Now, before I jump in, I want to thank our sponsor for this month, Franchise Business Review, who you might also know as FBR. And if you've been listening to this podcast, you know we talk a lot about the importance of building trust with franchisees. And one of the best ways to know whether that trust is actually there is to ask them. And that is exactly what FBR does. They help franchisors measure franchisee satisfaction and engagement through independent research and feedback, giving leadership teams the insights they need to strengthen relationships and build healthier franchise systems. At AC Inc., we help field teams build trust one conversation at a time. FBR helps you measure how your entire system is doing. And those things go hand in hand. To learn more about Franchise Business Review, visit franchisebusinessreview.com. Okay, here we go. Lesson 1. Stop trying to prove your value. Now, this especially applies with younger coaches. Maybe they're new to the role or young and new to the role. That was me back in the day when I was out in the field and young female boss's daughter trying to get older male franchisees to listen to me. I'm sure you can imagine how that went over. And, but the thing is, field coaches and FBCs often do struggle with credibility, right? Franchisees say things like, how could you possibly know anything about what it's like to own a business? And what risk have you ever taken in your life? Trust me, I'm speaking from experience. I remember them saying those things to me. And in an attempt to earn credibility, we often answer by just giving answers and solving problems for them and jumping at the chance to do things for them and explain why we're right. Try to show our expertise. But let me tell you a story. There's an FBC in our community who talked about this challenge once at a roundtable, and this was in the early days of having our certification, so this was great validation for us. She was talking about the challenge of an older male franchisee in an automotive brand who, had a lot of confidence, right? And he didn't seem to have the time of day for her. And he was a veteran franchisee, so he'd been around, and he really just refused coaching. And so we talked through this and said, what about instead of trying to prove yourself, stop and imagine that your only goal is to build a relationship. Start with small conversations. And what if you were to go in there, instead of saying, I'm here, I'm your franchise business coach, I'm going to tell you what to do, or I'm going to look at your profit and loss statements with you, or we're going to look at your KPIs or do compliance checks. What if you went in and instead said to the franchisee something like, hey, I get that you've been running this business for 10 years and I've never run one of these businesses, and I'm coming in and you're probably thinking, what do I possibly know? Well, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to be a soundboard for you or bring you information from the network that might help you make decisions, benchmarks and things. Ultimately, just be here for when you need me. Well, that's what this FBC did when she next met with him, or I think it might have even been on a call, and just sort of, hey, let's let the guard down a little bit. Well, guess what? She became that franchisee's trusted advisor. She kind of joked that I could barely get the guy off calls. He's calling me all the time now, and that's another whole issue, is creating boundaries. But he came around, and so it was the focus on building trust. And so instead of trying to prove yourself, get curious and show the franchisee that you're there to work alongside them. You could ask them things like, tell me more about where you're at and what your goals are. What's your longer term strategy here? You might uncover in that moment that they don't even have one, or you might uncover that they have one, but they might open up and say, well, what I'd really like is XYZ, but I only know I don't think I can hit that. I probably just can hit ABC. And there you go. There's your opportunity to say, well, let's talk that through. What's stopping you? We always say the coaches don't have to have all the answers. They just have to have the questions, and ideally the right questions, but just starting with asking questions. Another question you could ask a franchisee if you're trying to build trust and credibility in the early days is what's been frustrating you lately? Even a veteran franchise, you know what they're going to say. They're going to go off and, about the frustrations. But maybe what's been frustrating you in your local market that we could maybe talk through? What are you struggling with accomplishing? What are some of the goals within your business that I can maybe, bring you ideas from the network? People trust people who make an effort to understand them. So the key message with lesson number 1 is that trust is earned when you let your guard down a little bit and then show that you actually care. So lesson number 1, stop trying to prove your value. All right, lesson number 2, bring value they actually care about. I remember as a franchisee, our field rep, our FBC, we had a scheduled call, and he would just start rhyming through, some kind of information that he could have sent us in an email. And so that diminishes trust, right? So once trust starts to build after you've done what we talked about in step 1, lesson 1, is that you've started to earn the right to bring that value. Not generic advice, but relevant insights, what might actually matter to the franchisee. I'll give you some examples of what that might be, again, from my experience as a franchisee, is benchmarking against similar markets. If my FBC could go find out, okay, similar market to yours, their revenue is maybe similar, or maybe their revenue is similar, but they're more profitable. What are they doing different? or maybe their revenue similar, but they're really doing really well with selling certain products that are bringing their margins up or something. Like, tell me the stories of what's going on out there that might be relevant as benchmarks for me. Also helping them spot something in their profit and loss statement, because as a field coach or FBC, you have access to the network's profit and loss statements. Ideally, if you don't, that's something to work on. Obviously, that's a way that you've got to build trust so that they'll actually share that with you. But assuming you have access to that, then maybe you can spot in the franchisee's profit and loss statement, hey, when's the last time you did a comparison against other franchises in the network? Are you open to me just taking a little look? And maybe saying, I might not find anything, but who knows? Maybe I can find some area that we can save you money. Next thing you know, you uncover that, they're overpaying in some kind of a tech fee or something that they don't need. And there you've already brought value. Another great one we see is helping them think about their exit strategy. A lot of legacy franchisees and successful business franchisees, I can say business acumen franchisees, successful franchisees often haven't really solidified their exit strategy. That was me. I was a top performer, so I was like, well, I don't need to worry about that. I'm just going to keep making money, and then someday I'll decide to sell. Well, someday what can happen is ups and downs, right? So what if, as the FBC, you say to them, like, let's take a look at if your business, if we were going to sell, say you suddenly needed to sell today, say whatever happened that might be relevant to that person's life. Let's pretend you had, how ready are you? Are your books in order, and are you clear on your inventory, and whatever it is that needs to be considered, right? There's, again, ways to say it in a way that's helpful versus like, let's crack down on this. It's like, well, what do you want for an exit? And then, maybe they don't even know what their kind of vision is. That's something we teach at AC Inc. all the time, especially in our certification program, that like a franchisee doesn't even always know what their kind of vision is or their why. I call it the fired up goal, the FUG, fired up goal, because I'm like, what the FUG is a FUG, right? Well, a fired up goal, is a goal that gets you excited and makes you want to do the hard things and be accountable, right? So those are some things that ways that you can help a franchisee by bringing value once you've started to earn trust. Keeping in mind that it's okay and sometimes best to start small, like, and not to over promise anything. Like, hey, let me have a look at your P&L. I may or may not be able to spot something, or we can look at your KPIs, or let's look at ways that I can potentially help you, because one valuable insight can completely change the relationship. So the key message here is, don't try to impress them. Help them in ways that make them want you back. So lesson number 2, bring value they actually care about. And here we go with the third, lesson number 3. Remember what you're really trying to build. The goal isn't a coaching call or an action plan or a KPI review. That's not really the goal. The goal is influence, because influence is what changes behavior, and that behavior changes the business. If the franchisee starts changing their behavior and taking action towards their goals, that's going to make their business better. And once the franchisee starts to trust you, now you can influence them. From there, you can hold them accountable because they trust you. And that's what leads to franchisee results. If a franchisee can feel that you're just there to check a box, you know what's going to happen. They're going to get disengaged. When you go into those coaching calls, or when your team does, if you're listening as a COO or VP of Ops or director, and you're leading a team, help them understand your one goal is to have this franchisee trust you by the end of the call, or like just at least a little, and want to get on a call with you. It's not checking the boxes, it's building the relationship. Not checking the boxes, but the other way around. So if there's one thing I'd like to leave you with today, it's this. When a franchisee disengages, don't assume you've lost them. Ask yourself, have I earned the right to influence them yet? Because before accountability And before we can create buy-in and before meaningful coaching that actually moves the needle comes trust. And trust is something that every field coach or FBC can intentionally build one conversation at a time. That's it for today's episode of the Field Coach Experts Podcast. Thanks for joining me and for sticking around with me to the end. I almost forgot. I've got to give you a go be awesome action step that you can go take right now with the next call that you do with a franchisee. And that action step I'm going to give you is to look for whether or not there is trust. And if you're in doubt, maybe saying to them, hey, just a reminder, my role here is to be here as a sounding board, to be here to see things that you don't. I might be able to see blind spots that you don't because I'm up on the outside here. Just having that open conversation, the next call that you have, and saying like, I'm here to help, making sure they know that. That's going to be your go be awesome action step that you can go do right away. Because, as always, the goal is always to leave you with simple, actionable takeaways to modernize your field coaching and unlock that hidden profitability sitting right inside your brand. Now, if this sparked a shift for you, you got a takeaway from it, I would be honored if you would pass it along to someone on your team or share with a friend. And if you're curious about how this all could look in your franchise system, head to fieldcoachexperts.com. That's fieldcoachexperts.com, or reach out to me on LinkedIn. Until next time, go be awesome.